My husband looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You're nothing but a broodmare, not my real match." In that moment, something inside me didn't break. It went silent, a silence so sharp it cut deeper than any scream could. I stopped fighting for a marriage he'd already abandoned. I stopped hoping he'd see me. I became everything he feared: detached, indifferent, unavailable. But when he finally realized what that actually meant, it was already too late for him. My name is Lyria Vale, and this is the story of how the cruelest sentence I've ever heard became the beginning of my freedom. Before I share my story, I want to know you're here with me. Just say listening in the comments or let me know where you're from. I love hearing how far my story can reach. Sometimes even the smallest connection can make a story feel heard. Thank you. And now here's my story. If my voice touches something in you, even a little, please consider subscribing to the channel. Your support helps me keep telling these stories, especially the ones that so many women are too afraid to speak out loud. Now, let me take you back to the night everything changed for me. My name is Lyria Vale. I'm 34 years old. I'm a mother of twins named Alden and Aria. We live in Portland, Oregon, in a house that used to feel like a home. Most mornings start the same way: packing lunches, tying shoelaces, breaking up small arguments between siblings who love each other but can't seem to agree on anything before 8 in the morning. Then there's the rush to get everyone into the car before the traffic on Burnside gets unbearable. After dropping them off at school, I drive straight into downtown where I work as a senior strategist for a financial firm. The job is demanding. It's competitive. Sometimes it drains every ounce of energy I have. But at least it's predictable. Predictable is something my marriage stopped being a long time ago. As I weave through morning traffic, gripping the steering wheel a little too tight, I think about the imbalance in our home. I'm the one holding everything together: budgets, schedules, school forms, doctor appointments, permission slips, grocery lists. Meanwhile, my husband Conrad Hale spends most of his days chasing the latest wave of men's ascension retreats. He calls it spiritual evolution. I call it disappearing. Lately, I've stopped trying to name it at all. It's easier that way. Naming things gives them power, and I've given too much power to things that don't deserve it. It wasn't always like this. Years ago, when we met at a personal development conference in Seattle, Conrad seemed magnetic. He was confident, articulate, full of theories about human potential and growth. He could talk for hours about purpose and alignment, and I hung on to every word. I fell for the way he made me feel seen, like I was part of something bigger than myself. Back then, I thought we were aligned. I thought we wanted the same things. After we married, we rented a small house in Portland. We dreamed about building a stable life together, a grounded life. For a while, we had exactly that. We were happy. Or at least, I thought we were. Everything shifted after the twins were born. While I returned to work and juggled feedings, diapers, and sleepless nights, Conrad quit his regular job. He said he needed to find his masculine truth. What started as a weekend hobby turned into his full-time identity. The more I showed up for our family, the more he drifted into his abstract spiritual orbit. I remember lying awake some nights, reaching across the bed for someone who felt farther away each time I tried to touch him. The distance between us grew slowly at first, then it grew faster. Then it became the only thing I could feel. The cracks widened as his words changed. He began telling me I had lost my feminine energy because I worked too much. He said I didn't understand his spiritual journey, that I was too grounded in the physical world to see where he was headed. Each comment chipped away at something inside me. A little piece here, a little piece there. Until I started to realize I was no longer his partner. I was his anchor, something he resented being tied to. The more he evolved upward, as he put it, the more I felt him turning away from everything we built. And then there was the moment I still remember too clearly. During one of his retreats, I stopped by to drop off something he'd forgotten. A jacket, I think. Something simple. That's when I saw it. A fleeting glance he gave a woman named Maribel Rowan. The kind of look that lingered half a second too long. A look I hadn't seen directed at me in years. It was subtle, easy to dismiss. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was everything. But my intuition whispered that something was shifting beneath the surface. A current I had been refusing to acknowledge. I tried brushing it off, told myself I was imagining things, but the unease settled into me like a slow-forming bruise. It was the first sign of a betrayal I wasn't ready to name out loud, not even to myself. Life didn't fall apart overnight. That's not how these things work. Pieces started slipping quietly out of place. Almost politely, Conrad began coming home later, always with the same explanation. He was leading masculine workshops, helping men access their inner warrior, align their purpose, find their truth. His wardrobe changed too. Linen shirts replaced the button-downs he used to wear. Beaded bracelets appeared on his wrists. Earth-tone pants that were supposed to signal enlightenment. Dinner conversations dwindled into silence. When he did speak, it was only to mention terms like chakra alignment or sacred masculinity, words that used to intrigue me, words that now meant nothing. The distance between us wasn't loud. It was cold and steady, like frost creeping across a window. Our dinners became so quiet I could hear the refrigerator hum. He talked less to me and more about me, specifically about women in his community who understood him on a deeper plane. Unlike me, the twins started asking why their dad wasn't home for dinner anymore. Each time they asked, I struggled to find an answer that didn't sound like an accusation. I wanted to protect them from the truth, but the truth was becoming harder to hide. Then came the first unmistakable signal. Maribel posted photos from another retreat, sun-drenched group shots, meditations in circles, and barely visible in one of them was Conrad's reflection in a window, standing closer to her than anyone else. Too close. Curious and unsettled, I checked his messages later that evening. What I found made my stomach drop. Threads labeled energy-sharing exchanges, filled with language that crossed emotional boundaries. Not physical cheating. Not yet. But a level of intimacy he'd never offered me in years. Words he should have been saying to me. Words that belonged in our marriage. Given to someone else. That discovery hollowed me out. But I didn't show it on my face. I couldn't afford to. Nights became heavier after that. I'd stand in front of the bathroom mirror, studying myself like I was looking at someone I used to know well but hadn't spoken to in years. I kept wondering what part of me had changed. What had disappeared to make room for this version of our marriage? Instead of confronting him, I found myself watching more, reacting less. Observation felt safer than conversation. Somewhere deep down, I sensed he already saw me as someone spiritually inferior, someone holding him back. Why give him more ammunition? And then came the second hit, the one that turned suspicion into something solid. A coworker mentioned seeing Conrad and Maribel together at a cafe in the Pearl District, laughing, leaning in, looking nothing like mentor and mentee, looking like something else entirely. I confronted Conrad gently later that night. I didn't accuse, I just asked. He claimed he'd spent that entire day at a retreat in Sedona. He didn't even flinch while lying. That was what broke me, not the lie itself, but the ease with which he delivered it, as though honesty were optional, as though I didn't deserve the truth. I went to bed that night with a single question echoing through me. If nothing was wrong, why did he have to hide where he'd been? The question didn't scare me anymore. The answer did. By the time I pulled into our driveway the following evening, my body felt like it was made of cement. I had worked a 12-hour day. I'd rushed Alden to urgent care for a fever that turned out to be nothing serious, but the worry had drained me anyway. I'd still managed to pick up Arya from choir practice. All I wanted was a moment of quiet, a breath, a pause, anything that resembled peace. Instead, the house felt unusually hollow when I walked in. Whatever warmth used to live there had already slipped out through the cracks. I dropped my keys onto the counter and stepped into the kitchen. Every muscle ached. Even my thoughts felt dull, sluggish, like they were moving through fog. Conrad stood at the sink, rinsing a glass with slow, deliberate movements. His face was set in a stony calm I'd grown familiar with. But tonight it felt sharper, more distant, like I was interrupting a life that no longer included me. I tried to bridge the gap, even though something inside me warned against it. "Long day?" I asked softly, hoping he might sense the exhaustion in my voice, maybe even care enough to acknowledge it. But he didn't turn. His shoulders didn't even shift. Instead, without looking at me, he said the words that would carve a permanent line through the rest of my life. You're nothing but a broodmare to me, a vessel to have children, not a real partner. The words hit with such cold precision I couldn't react at first. His tone was flat, steady, almost rehearsed, as if he'd practiced saying it until he could deliver it without emotion. He kept going, rinsing that useless glass, as if it were the only thing deserving of his attention. You don't have feminine energy anymore. You block my spiritual growth. Maribel actually understands me, connects with me. You never have. I stood there, frozen, feeling my heartbeat thud against a rib cage that suddenly felt too small. I waited for anger, for tears, for anything resembling a response. But nothing came, just a tight, crushing pressure in my chest, as if someone had reached inside and squeezed until all the air left my body. Still, I stayed silent. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I could only stand there and absorb the impact of words designed to destroy me. Then he added, in the same calm voice, "We're just co-parents now. I need a true partner for the path I'm on." That was his final strike. Not said in frustration, not tossed out in a fight, said like a decision he'd already embraced long before I walked into that kitchen. In that moment, I understood that he didn't see me as a person anymore, much less his equal. I was a role, a function, a box he'd checked years ago and now wanted to discard. I wasn't a wife. I wasn't a partner. I was inconvenient. I didn't argue. There was nothing to argue about. Something inside me snapped so cleanly it felt like clarity. Not the breaking kind of snap, the releasing kind. I stepped back from the counter, my voice gone, my body moving on instinct alone. I walked to our bedroom, my bedroom from that moment on, and shut the door quietly behind me. Standing in front of the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. Her eyes were dry but heavy. Her shoulders were tense but still. I whispered to her, steady and certain, "If he sees me as nothing more than a broodmare, then starting tomorrow, I will become exactly what he fears most: independent, silent, untouched by him." That night, instead of crying, I opened my laptop. I created a folder on my desktop and named it Exit Strategy. Line by line, I began listing every instance of neglect, every irresponsible choice, every moment he'd abandoned this family while claiming spiritual expansion, the receipts he didn't think I'd find, the patterns he didn't think I'd notice, the timeline of his betrayal laid out in black and white. I knew then that this wasn't a reaction. It was the beginning of the end. The true fracture that could never be repaired. The moment I finally chose myself over the ruins of what we used to be. I woke before sunrise the next morning, not from anxiety, from an eerie sense of clarity. The heaviness from the night before had dissolved into something vacant and calm, like my emotions had been stripped clean, scraped away to reveal something harder underneath. I moved through the house quietly, preparing breakfast, packing lunches, waking the twins with practiced gentleness. I didn't check to see if Conrad was awake. I didn't ask how he slept. For the first time in years, he wasn't part of my morning equation. He walked into the kitchen as I was lacing Arya's shoes. He watched me for several long seconds, as if trying to match the woman he insulted last night with the one moving wordlessly before him. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a hesitant edge. "Do you want to talk about what happened?" "No," I said simply. Not cold, just factual. That one syllable unsettled him. I could see it in the way his brows tightened, in the small shift of his posture. He expected anger, tears, some dramatic reaction he could later reference as evidence of my emotional instability. What he got instead was indifference. And indifference is the one thing people like him cannot stand. The moment the kids were ready, I grabbed my keys and left the house without waiting for him to say anything else. At work, I kept my phone face down, ignoring the messages he usually sent about dinner or his schedule. I didn't ask if he'd be home. I didn't update him about the twins. I didn't even tell him the firm wanted me to attend a major leadership meeting in Seattle next month. An opportunity I would have once shared with him automatically, but not anymore. That version of me was gone. That silence became my new language. It was the only one he deserved. Each night after the kids went to bed, I opened the exit strategy file. I recorded the times he left the house, the times he returned, the events he skipped. I added screenshots of messages between him and Maribel. Messages that crossed every boundary a married man should honor. I documented the phrases he had used to diminish me. By putting everything into words, I stripped his chaos of power. Facts are hard to argue with. Facts don't care about spiritual alignment or sacred masculine energy. Facts just exist. As the days passed, he grew uneasy. He noticed changes in me. The way I dressed differently. Nicer clothes, subtle makeup, a posture that no longer folded inward. When I returned home late one evening after dinner with coworkers, he asked almost accusatory, "Why were you out so long?" He scanned my face as if searching for something. Guilt, maybe, or proof that I was doing something wrong. "You said you wanted distance," I replied calmly. "I'm giving you exactly that." It was the truth, and he knew it. For the first time, he seemed unsure of his footing. The ground that had always been stable beneath him was starting to crack. I moved into the spare room under the pretense of needing quiet for late-night work. I stopped waiting for him to help with the twins and handled everything myself. Let them grow accustomed to me being the consistent parent, the one who showed up, the one they could count on. I met with a lawyer during my lunch break, keeping every detail hidden behind my measured silence, planning, preparing, building a case he didn't even know existed. Then, one evening, as I walked past his car to take out the recycling, I heard his voice through the cracked window. He was on the phone, speaking softly, tenderly, in a way he never spoke to me anymore. "You're my soul match," he said. "You always have been." Maribel? Of course it was her. I felt no shock, no heartbreak, just confirmation. The kind that settles into your bones and rearranges everything inside you. That moment didn't hurt. It simply clarified the path forward. He hadn't just drifted away. He had chosen another place to anchor himself. And now, finally, I was choosing where to anchor myself. Once I chose silence over confrontation, my mind became sharper, more strategic. I stopped reacting and started investigating. Not emotionally, methodically. One morning, after dropping the twins at school, I drove not to the office, but to a building off Division Street. A discreet building with tinted glass doors. Inside worked a private investigator, a man who didn't ask questions beyond what he needed to know. I told him everything. Follow Conrad during his next retreat in Sedona. Document who he traveled with, where he stayed, how he spent his time. He didn't blink. It was just another case to him. To me, it was the line between doubt and truth. At home later, I combed through our bank statements with the same precision I used at work. Cross-checking his claimed retreat dates with his card transactions revealed inconsistencies. Payments in Portland on days he swore he was out of state. Multiple charges from boutique stores I'd never heard of. Recurring transfers labeled energy coaching that went directly into accounts I couldn't trace. At first, I made note of every transfer, every unexplained purchase, every dollar that should have gone toward our family but went somewhere else instead. I also searched my inbox for every school-related email from the past year. Not one message was addressed to him. It was all me. Every reminder, every emergency pickup, every parent meeting. He had slowly disappeared from the role he claimed to hold. And I had the proof to show it. Several days later, the investigator called. His voice was steady, professional, but the information still tightened something inside my chest. Conrad and Maribel had arrived at the Sedona retreat in the same car. They left together too. He documented them, checking into a hotel nearby. Separate rooms, but on the same floor. Booked within minutes of each other. He said nothing about physical intimacy because there was nothing visibly incriminating, yet the closeness he described was far beyond casual colleagues. Their body language told its own story. The way they leaned toward each other. The way they touched casually, comfortably. Like people who had done it many times before. I thought I'd feel angry when I heard this. But what I felt was closer to confirmation. A puzzle piece sliding exactly where I suspected it belonged. Another line in my file. Another fact I could use. The next morning, I opened my email and saw a message from Maribel. Her tone dripped with spiritual righteousness. cloaked in soft language meant to sound compassionate. She wrote that I should release Conrad so his soul can evolve freely, that I was holding him back with fear-based energy. She framed her intrusion as a divine calling rather than what it really was: a violation of my marriage, a theft of my husband, an invasion of my life. She truly believed she was doing something noble, that my family was just collateral damage in her quest to feel enlightened. The arrogance of it made my blood run cold, but I didn't respond. She wasn't worth even the smallest reaction. Let her think she won. Let her believe she had the upper hand. I knew something she didn't. I knew how this story was going to end. Meanwhile, Conrad grew restless. My silence made him uneasy. He dropped shallow questions into the air, waiting for me to bite. "Are you okay?" Or, "You seem distant." When I didn't rise to the bait, he tried new angles. He complimented my outfit one morning, a habit he hadn't shown in years. Later, he suggested we have dinner together. Just the two of us. Like old times. I watched the performance unfold, noting every forced smile, every hollow gesture. He didn't miss me. He missed control. And there's a difference between those two things that men like him never seem to understand. And still, another truth surfaced. As I dug deeper into our financial accounts, I discovered something that made my jaw tighten. He had paid for several of Maribel's retreats using our joint savings. Transfers labeled as coaching sessions were sent directly to her email-linked payment account. It wasn't just one or two payments, it was a pattern. Thousands of dollars over months. Money that should have gone toward our children's future, toward our family. Instead, it funded his affair. It wasn't the money that unsettled me. It was the betrayal of using family resources to finance his connection with another woman, all while lecturing me about spiritual alignment, all while telling me I lacked feminine energy. The hypocrisy was staggering. I took these findings to my lawyer during a lunch meeting in a quiet corner of the Pearl. She reviewed everything. Her eyes moved across the documents with practiced efficiency. Then she looked up at me and said plainly that I had a strong case for primary custody. His financial irresponsibility, his emotional absence, his pattern of neglect, it all added up to something a judge would take seriously. Her advice was simple: document everything. Every bedtime I did alone, every school form I signed, every medical appointment I managed, every absence from him. She reminded me to gather proof of my income and his lack of contribution. Step by step, the structure of my case started forming, like building a house, one brick at a time. Then Conrad made a sudden shift that caught me off guard. He came home early one evening, unusually cheerful, almost nervous. He mentioned that someone at his retreat told him my company might be opening a leadership position in Seattle. The implication hung between us like smoke. If I accepted such a role, I could move with the twins, I could leave, I could start over. That possibility rattled him more than anything else had. Suddenly, he wanted to salvage our marriage. He spoke about reconnection, shared growth, recommitting to each other. But the words rang hollow, because I knew where they came from. Not love, fear. Fear of losing stability. Fear of losing proximity to his children. Fear of losing the version of me that kept his life from collapsing. For the first time, I saw clearly that he didn't want a wife. He wanted an anchor he could resent but still rely on, someone to handle the bills while he floated in spiritual circles, someone to raise the kids while he searched for his truth, someone to blame when things went wrong. And I knew then that I was almost ready to cut the rope. It startled him when his efforts didn't immediately pull me back. One evening, he approached me in the hallway with an eager smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Do you want to go out to dinner?" he asked. "So we could talk? Really talk?" The next morning, he suggested I take a day off. Said we could spend it together. Rebuild our shared energy. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed the sudden concern. But his timing made everything transparent. This wasn't affection, this was panic. "I'll think about it," I told him lightly. Not yes, not no. The softness of my voice seemed to unsettle him more than outright rejection would have. He didn't know how to handle this version of me. The version that didn't fight, didn't cry, didn't beg. The version that simply observed, and planned, and waited. Days passed. I maintained my focus on work, the kids, my growing file of evidence. I didn't offer emotional connection. I didn't ask where he was going or when he'd be home. My distance became a mirror he couldn't avoid, and soon the cracks in his composure began to show. One night, the simmering tension boiled over. He confronted me in the living room. His voice was tight, accusatory. "You've become cold," he said, unfeeling. "What happened to you?" He threw my own detachment at me like an accusation, conveniently forgetting he'd once labeled me a broodmare in the same kitchen where we now stood. When my phone buzzed with a text from a female colleague and I smiled absent-mindedly at something she wrote, he snapped. His voice sharpened as he demanded to know if I was seeing someone. The irony was almost laughable. I looked him in the eye. Calm. Steady. "Why does it matter if, in your mind, our marriage is already over?" I asked why he cared where I went, or who I spoke to. When he had spent months making it clear I was no longer his partner, his face tightened in frustration. He started to say something, stopped, then started again, tripping over his own contradictions. I made sure to document the exchange afterward. Every admission he made, every contradiction, every sign of instability. All of it went into the file. Then came the moment that revealed more than he intended. While he sat on the couch scrolling through his messages, he tried to change his phone's password. His fingers moved too quickly, carelessly, and several notifications appeared on the screen before he could hide them. I saw her name, Maribel, followed by a preview of her latest message. "Have you told her yet? She needs to release you." The words confirmed something I'd sensed all along. He didn't want to end the marriage himself. He wanted me to be the one to do it. So he could preserve his image within his spiritual circle, so he could play the victim, so he could tell everyone that his wife couldn't handle his evolution. This wasn't a man searching for peace. This was a man desperate to avoid consequence. As I studied his behavior with this new understanding, another truth became painfully clear. He didn't want to lose access to me. Not emotionally, financially. I provided stability, income, child care, structure. Without me, he didn't have enough ground beneath him to stand on. The thought that I could accept a promotion in Seattle and leave with the twins unnerved him completely. He wasn't fighting for us. He was fighting for convenience. The final push came from someone I never expected. A former attendee of his retreats reached out to me privately. A man I'd never met. He said he felt compelled to tell me something. Conrad had been sharing details about our marriage during his workshops, framing me as a restrictive force he needed liberation from. He turned our real life into content for his teachings. Our real struggles became material for his performances. My private pain became his spiritual credential. Hearing that snapped the last thread of restraint in me. It was no longer about what he felt for Maribel or what he wanted from me. It was about dignity. The dignity he had stripped from our marriage long before I realized it. That night, after putting the twins to bed, I sat at my desk and added the final pages to my file. Financial records, school documents, screenshots, written accounts. By the time I closed my laptop, everything was ready. I had enough proof, enough clarity, enough strength. I called my lawyer the next morning and scheduled the appointment. I was done preparing. Now it was time to act. The house felt unnervingly still that night. After weeks of quiet calculation, gathering documents, tracking his absences, noting every careless choice, silence had become familiar. But this silence felt different, heavy, final. The twins were already asleep. Their soft breathing drifted from down the hall, leaving only Conrad and me in the dim glow of the kitchen lights. He sat at the table, scrolling through his phone, unaware that this was the last evening he'd occupy that seat as my husband. I walked in with a slim folder tucked under my arm. My heartbeat was calm, my breath even. I had spent too long letting fear take the lead. Tonight, certainty guided me. I set the folder on the table, light in weight, heavy in consequence. Conrad looked up, offering a small smile that suggested he thought my silence had softened. "Do you want to talk?" he asked. Hope flickered in his voice. "We need to discuss the future," I said. Steady, composed. That hope brightened. Maybe he expected reconciliation, an apology, A softening of my stance. Instead, I opened my mouth and sliced through whatever fantasy he had built. I want a divorce. He froze. For a moment, he looked like he couldn't quite process the words, as if the logic of his world didn't allow me to be the one to end things. Why? He asked. Even though we both knew the answer lived in every corner of this house. I slid the folder across the table. Everything you need to understand is in here. One by one, I outlined the contents. Documentation of his absence at almost every school event for 6 months. Bank statements showing he used our joint account to pay for Maribel's retreats, those conveniently labeled energy coaching sessions, a detailed calendar proving I handled nearly every piece of childcare alone. And finally, printed photographs from the investigator. He and Maribel stepping out of her car in Sedona, checking into adjacent hotel rooms. He flipped through the pages, his face shifted through a dozen shades of denial. First, he insisted everything was misunderstood. Then he tried apologizing, those slippery apologies that don't land anywhere real. When that failed, anger took over. "You're exaggerating," he said. "You're blowing things out of proportion." I didn't argue. My silence rattled him more than any words ever could. Then, in a burst of indignation, he showed his true nature. "You're choosing to leave while I'm growing?" he snapped. "While I'm evolving spiritually? You're sabotaging my progress." His accusation didn't hurt, it clarified. For years, he'd expected me to be his foundation while he floated above responsibility, calling it enlightenment. Tonight, he saw that foundation walking away. "I'm asking for full custody," I said, my voice unwavering. "I'm the one raising them. I'm the one providing for them. And I want a life where I'm not treated as a broodmare," he scoffed, attempting one last weak threat. "The court favors fathers who are invested in child development. I lead workshops. I understand children's emotional needs." I handed him a stack of emails from teachers, coaches, and doctors, all addressed only to me. He recognized the truth immediately, and in his flustered attempt to justify himself, he admitted he'd missed nearly every meeting that year. More evidence, more clarity. When he ran out of arguments, I stood up. "I've been preparing for this since the night you called me a broodmare," I said calmly. It was the first time I repeated that sentence aloud, and saying it felt like releasing something that had been weighing down my lungs for months. He sank into his chair, hands trembling as he held the folder. I walked out of the kitchen, leaving him alone with every mistake he had ever tried to hide. For the first time, I felt victorious. Not over him, but over the fear that had kept me in place for too long. The divorce process unfolded faster than anyone expected. With my documentation laid out clearly, the court moved efficiently. I described with unwavering composure the structure of our daily life. Every school pickup, every doctor visit, every night spent managing the twins' routines while Conrad retreated into his spiritual world. Teachers confirmed it, pediatricians confirmed it, even his own calendar confirmed it. Conrad tried to paint me as cold and emotionally absent, but the evidence contradicted every word he spoke. His own financial records undermined him. His own emails betrayed him. Before he even had a chance to build a narrative, the facts had already dismantled it. In the end, the ruling was straightforward. I was granted primary custody. He received alternating weekends and one dinner visit per week. The judge assigned him a modest child support payment, citing the instability of his retreat income. When the decision was read aloud, something inside me finally loosened. My children would have stability. I would have peace. The weight I'd been carrying for years lifted from my shoulders. I could breathe again. After the divorce, consequences found Conrad faster than I expected. Word spread within the retreat community that he had used personal marital struggles as teaching material, and his following began to crumble. Workshops were canceled. Members withdrew. His leadership, once inflated by ego and jargon, flattened under the weight of truth. It happened gradually at first. A few people stopped attending his sessions, then a few more. Whispers traveled through the spiritual circles he had worked so hard to cultivate. People talked. They always do. And what they said wasn't flattering. They spoke about how he had stood on stages and shared intimate details of our marriage. how he had painted me as the enemy of his evolution, how he had used my pain as a stepping stone to elevate himself. The community that once celebrated him began to see through the performance. They realized that a man who would betray his wife so publicly couldn't be trusted to guide anyone toward enlightenment. His workshops emptied out. The retreat centers that once welcomed him started declining his proposals. Event organizers stopped returning his calls. The income he had grown dependent on dried up almost overnight. All those years he spent floating above responsibility while I held everything together finally caught up with him. He had no savings, no stable career, no backup plan, just a crumbling reputation and a growing pile of regret. I heard from mutual acquaintances that he tried to rebrand himself, tried to pivot to a new audience, but the internet has a long memory. Screenshots of his old posts circulated. Testimonies from former followers emerged. People who had once admired him now questioned everything he had taught them. His words, once treated as wisdom, were now examined for hypocrisy, and they found plenty. Even Maribel left Portland shortly after. She joined another spiritual group on the West Coast, abandoning the man she once claimed to guide. The soul match she had spoken of so confidently turned out to be nothing more than a convenient fantasy. When reality arrived, she disappeared. I wasn't surprised. Women like Maribel are drawn to men who seem powerful, men who have followers, men who command attention. But Conrad without his platform was just a man, just a deeply flawed, insecure man who had lost everything he used to hide behind. He was no longer magnetic, no longer special, no longer worth her time. So she moved on, found another guru, another circle, another place to perform her spiritual superiority. I wonder sometimes if she even thinks about the damage she helped cause. Probably not. People like her rarely do. The irony wasn't lost on me. Conrad had spent years telling me I lacked spiritual depth, that I was too grounded, too practical, too focused on the material world. He made me feel like my stability was a weakness. But in the end, that stability was exactly what he needed, and exactly what he lost when I walked away. Without me managing the household, without my income paying the bills, without my presence giving him credibility as a family man, he had nothing solid to stand on. He finally learned what I had known all along. Being grounded isn't a flaw, it's a foundation. And without it, everything collapses. I did the opposite. I expanded. I accepted the promotion in Seattle, moved into a home overlooking Lake Union. The twins settled into their new school easily, delighted by the bigger rooms, the quiet mornings, the peace that now filled our home. The move felt like rebirth. Packing up the old house was emotional. Every room held memories, some good, most painful. But as I taped each box shut, I felt lighter, like I was sealing away chapters that no longer belonged to my story. The drive to Seattle was long. The kids slept most of the way, and I spent those quiet hours thinking about everything I had survived, everything I had overcome, everything that lay ahead. Our new home was nothing like the one we left behind. It was bright, open, filled with natural light that poured through wide windows. The view of Lake Union took my breath away the first time I saw it. Water stretching out calm and endless, boats drifting lazily across the surface, mountains rising in the distance. It felt like a painting, like something I had only ever dreamed about. And now it was mine. Ours. The twins adapted faster than I expected. Children are resilient that way. They made friends within the first week, came home chattering about their new teachers, their new classmates, the playground that was bigger than anything they had seen before. Watching them thrive filled me with a joy I hadn't felt in years. This was what I had fought for. This peace, this stability, this chance for them to grow up in a home filled with love instead of tension. I built a life with structure and warmth, something our marriage had lost years ago. I created routines that felt nurturing instead of exhausting. Breakfast together every morning, homework at the kitchen table while I cooked dinner, movie nights on Fridays, weekend adventures exploring our new city. We visited parks, museums, bookstores, farmers markets. We built new traditions that belonged only to us, traditions Conrad had never been part of. And honestly, traditions that were better without him. I focused on my career with renewed energy. The promotion came with more responsibility, more challenges, but also more recognition, more respect. For the first time in years, I felt seen at work, valued. My ideas mattered. My contributions were acknowledged. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't just someone's wife, someone's mother. I was Lyria, a woman with talent, ambition, a future that belonged entirely to her. I even started seeing someone, a chiropractor I met at the children's clinic, kind, grounded, someone who listened without translating my words into spiritual rhetoric, someone who saw me as a person, not a role, not a function, a person. His name was Daniel. He had warm eyes and a quiet strength that put me at ease immediately. We met when I brought Arya in for a minor back issue. He was gentle with her, patient, explained everything in terms she could understand, made her laugh when she was nervous. I noticed the way he treated her, with genuine care, not performance, not ego, just kindness. And something in me softened. We started talking after appointments, brief conversations that grew longer each time. He asked about my life, my work, my kids, and he actually listened to the answers, didn't interrupt, didn't redirect everything back to himself, didn't make me feel like I was taking up too much space. It was such a simple thing, being heard. But after years with Conrad, it felt revolutionary. Our first date was coffee at a small shop near the clinic. We talked for 3 hours. About everything. About nothing. About the messy parts of life that most people hide on first dates. I told him about my divorce. Not all the details, but enough. He didn't flinch, didn't judge, just nodded and said that leaving a bad situation takes more courage than staying. That single sentence meant more to me than he probably realized. Daniel was different from Conrad in every way that mattered. He didn't speak in abstract concepts or spiritual jargon. He spoke plainly, honestly. He showed up when he said he would, did what he promised, treated me with consistency. And consistency, I learned, is its own form of love, maybe the most important form. We took things slow. I needed that. Needed time to trust again. Time to believe that not every man would betray me. Time to let my guard down without feeling like I was making a mistake. Daniel gave me that time. Never rushed, never pressured, just steady, present, real. Then one evening, months later, Conrad appeared at my front door. His posture slumped, his face thinner, his confidence carved down to nothing. "I made a mistake," he said, his voice cracking. "Maribel manipulated me. No one believes in me anymore. No one listens." He asked for another chance, a second beginning. I shook my head slowly. "Did you forget?" I said, my tone calm. Almost gentle. "I'm just a broodmare, and we're only co-parents now." The moment the words left my lips, his expression collapsed. He understood finally that the damage he caused wasn't something time or regret could undo. Some words can't be taken back. Some wounds don't heal. Some doors, once closed, stay closed forever. I shut the door with a quiet finality and felt relief instead of remorse. Life grew brighter after that. The twins told me I laughed more now. They loved our weekend outings, the picnics at Lake Union, the small rituals we created that Conrad had never bothered to join. We built new traditions together, just the three of us, and those traditions felt more meaningful than anything we'd had before. I realized I hadn't just left my marriage. I'd left the version of myself who accepted being diminished, the version who apologized for taking up space, the version who believed she wasn't enough. That woman was gone, and in her place stood someone stronger, someone clearer, someone free. Looking back, every painful step led me to a life defined not by survival but by choice, by self-respect, by freedom. His cruelest sentence had become my turning point. Being called a broodmare hadn't crushed me, it had awakened me. And in that awakening, I found a strength he never imagined I possessed. After everything was settled, after the court hearings, after the move to Seattle, after the last conversation where Conrad finally understood I was no longer his to hurt, I found myself standing alone in my new home one quiet evening. The twins were asleep. their bedrooms filled with the kind of peace children only feel when the world around them finally becomes safe again. And for the first time in years, the silence didn't scare me. It felt like oxygen. I looked around the room and realized how far I had come. From the woman who once apologized for existing, who accepted crumbs and called them meals, who stayed silent when she should have spoken, who stayed still when she should have run. I survived words meant to destroy me. I survived the slow erosion of being unseen. And somehow, through all the unraveling, I found a version of myself who wasn't just stronger, but clearer. Clear about what love should feel like. Clear about what respect should look like. Clear about what I would never allow again. I spent so many years not knowing these things, so many years accepting behavior that should have been unacceptable, so many years telling myself that maybe I was the problem, that maybe if I tried harder, loved better, gave more, things would change. But they never did. And now I understand why. You cannot love someone into treating you well. You cannot sacrifice enough to make someone see your worth. Either they see it or they don't. And if they don't, no amount of bending yourself into shapes will make them open their eyes. Love should feel like safety. Like coming home after a long day and knowing you can exhale, knowing you don't have to perform, knowing you don't have to earn affection. It should feel like being seen, really seen, not for what you do or what you provide, but for who you are underneath all of it. Love should feel like partnership, two people walking side by side, not one person dragging the other forward while they float above responsibility. Respect should look like consideration, like someone thinking about how their words will land before they speak, like someone valuing your time, your energy, your dreams. Respect should look like being included in decisions that affect your life, like having your opinions matter, like being treated as an equal, not a subordinate, not a servant, not a broodmare. I know now what I will never allow again. I will never allow someone to make me feel small in my own home. I will never allow someone to use spiritual language as a weapon against me, to tell me I lack energy or alignment when what I lack is simply their respect. I will never allow someone to take from me financially while contributing nothing emotionally. I will never allow someone to disappear from parenting while claiming the title of father. I will never allow someone to compare me to another woman and find me wanting. I will never allow someone to speak to me the way he spoke to me that night in the kitchen. Those words will never again have power over me. Because I have reclaimed that power, every single piece of it. There are still days when memories sting a little, when I wonder how long he practiced that sentence before saying it out loud. Did he rehearse it in the car on the way home? Did he say it to himself in the mirror first? Did he tell Maribel about it afterward? Did they laugh together about how I would react? These questions used to haunt me. They used to keep me awake at night, turning over and over in my mind like stones in a river, smoothing down but never disappearing. But even then, it no longer defines me. Those words were his choice, his cruelty, his failure, not mine. I did not deserve them. I did nothing to earn them. They say more about who he is than they ever could about who I am. And I refuse to carry the weight of his brokenness any longer. I carried it for years, thinking it was my job, thinking it was what wives do, thinking love meant enduring. But love does not mean enduring abuse. Love does not mean shrinking yourself. Love does not mean staying silent while someone dismantles your self-worth piece by piece. The only thing that defines me now is what I chose afterward. I chose to stop reacting and start planning. I chose to stop crying and start documenting. I chose to stop hoping he would change and start building a future where I didn't need him to. I chose silence, not the silence of defeat, but the silence of strategy. The silence of a woman who knew exactly what she was doing and refused to give him the satisfaction of watching her fall apart. I chose myself. For the first time in years, maybe for the first time ever, I looked at my reflection and decided she was worth fighting for. She was worth protecting. She was worth more than what she had been given. And I fought for her. Every document I gathered was a battle. Every meeting with my lawyer was a victory. Every night I didn't break down was proof that I was stronger than I knew. I chose my children. I chose to show them what it looks like when a mother refuses to be diminished. I chose to model strength, resilience, self-respect. I want my daughter to grow up knowing she never has to accept crumbs from anyone. I want my son to grow up knowing that real men don't tear women down to feel powerful. I want both of them to understand that leaving a bad situation is not failure. It is courage. It is wisdom. It is love in its purest form. I chose a life where my worth isn't debated or diminished, a life where I don't have to prove myself every day just to be seen. A life where my contributions are valued, where my voice matters, where I am treated like a partner, not a placeholder, not a convenience, not something to be discarded when a shinier option appears. And every step I take from here is a step away from the woman he tried to shrink, the woman who apologized too much, who made herself smaller to make him feel bigger, who accepted disrespect because she thought it was better than being alone. That woman deserved compassion. She was doing the best she could with what she knew, but she is not who I am anymore. Every step I take now is toward the woman I was always meant to become. A woman who knows her value, who speaks her truth, who refuses to beg for love from people who don't know how to give it. A woman who builds her own security, her own happiness, her own peace. A woman who teaches her children through example that you can survive the worst and still bloom. If you've listened to my story this far, thank you, truly. Sharing it wasn't easy. There were moments when I wondered if I should keep this private, if anyone would even care, if my pain was worth putting into words. But I realized that stories like mine need to be told. Because somewhere out there, someone is living this right now. Someone is lying awake tonight wondering if they're crazy, wondering if they deserve better, wondering if they have the strength to leave. And I want that person to know the answer is yes. Yes to all of it. But I hope it reminds someone out there that you are not trapped just because someone convinced you that you are. Abusers are excellent at making you believe you have no options. They isolate you. They make you dependent. They chip away at your confidence until you forget who you were before them. They tell you no one else will want you, that you're lucky to have them, that you'll never survive on your own. These are lies. Every single one of them. You have more strength than you know. You have more options than they want you to see. And you are worthy of a love that doesn't hurt. You're allowed to walk away, even if you've been together for years, even if you have children, even if everyone else thinks your relationship is perfect, even if leaving means starting over with nothing. You're allowed to walk away from anything that steals your peace. You're allowed to rebuild, brick by brick, day by day. It won't be easy. Some days it will feel impossible. But you are capable of creating a new life, a better life, a life that belongs to you. You're allowed to start again, even if the world has told you otherwise, even if you feel too old, too tired, too broken. You are never too anything to begin again. Your story is not over. This is just a new chapter, and you get to decide how it goes. And you deserve more than the bare minimum someone gave you. You deserve more than crumbs. You deserve more than being someone's anchor while they float away. You deserve a partner, not a person who treats you like a possession. You deserve to be chosen. Fully. Completely. Without conditions. You deserve someone who is proud to be with you, who shows up for you, who fights for you, who would never dream of calling you a broodmare or anything like it. That person exists, and you will find them, or they will find you. But first, you have to let go of the one who doesn't deserve you. Before you go, if my story touched something in you, or even made you feel a little less alone, please consider subscribing to the channel. Your support helps me keep telling stories that are real, raw, sometimes difficult, but necessary. These stories matter. They remind us that we're not alone in our struggles, that others have walked this path before us and survived, that there is hope even in the darkest moments. By subscribing, you help me reach more people who need to hear these words, more people who need to know that they can choose themselves too. Leave a comment. Let me know where you're listening from. You'd be surprised how much strength comes from knowing someone else is out there, hearing you, rooting for you. Every comment I read reminds me why I share these stories. Every message from someone who found courage in my words makes every difficult moment of telling this story worth it. We are connected, even if we've never met. Even if we live on opposite sides of the world, Our stories bind us together. Our pain, our healing, our hope. Thank you for being here. And wherever you are in your own story, I hope you choose yourself too.